Hey everybody, today we're working on my V8 Mountaineer in 1999, and we noticed the other day when we were driving it, it was going squeaka, 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 and I'm like, uh-oh, I think I got a U-joint going bad. So let me get the light, let me grab the light. And it's not the back U-joint, it's the front U-joint. If you look right here, this boot is pulled back, and you can see that it's kind of rusty, as this side over here, the boot is all the way up tight. So I do believe, and you can see it looks like maybe it's putting out a little, yeah, see the rusty dust? And there's rusty dust everywhere. But I do believe this cap is dry, making it go squeaka, squeaka, squeaka. So we're going to take and pull the front drive shaft out. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to mark the drive shaft and mark the this piece here, so we know we're putting the drive shaft back in the same place. And these are T30 Torx to take the straps off of the U-joint. And back here it has a constant velocity joint, and it's got 6 8mm bolts that we're going to pull off to get the drive shaft out. All right, let me take and pull the drive shaft out, and we'll get it on the workbench, and we will get working on it. So we got the drive shaft in the vise now, and let's go over a few things. So this way here actually feels pretty good. It has no play, and it's not making any noise. So I haven't pulled the grease caps off yet, so let's pull this grease cap off and see what it looks like inside. So this grease cap here, you have your roller bearings and your grease and your seal. As you see, there's plenty of grease. The roller bearings are still intact. So let's look at this side over here. This side I can't even get off, so let's get a pair of pliers. Hear the squeaking? That's what it was doing in the car, but it was going eka, 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 but there's the squeak noise. So as I pull this off, as you see, the seal has come off, and see all the rust. And as we pull this off, that is bad. Let me dump this out and show you. Those are the needle bearings. As you see, there absolutely is no grease inside this cap. And basically that rust, those needle bearings has turned to rust. So if you would have kept driving on this, eventually the needle bearings would have fallen out. Then this cap starts banging around and then wears out. So that is what was making the squeaky noise. So now we know that that is actually bad, because see how this has grease on it? See how nice and shiny and greasy it is? Actually, there wasn't a lot of grease left in this cap either, but you can see all the roller bearings are still intact and there's grease in there. So now the next thing is I'm going to show you old school on how to get this thing apart. So now on here you have these retaining clips. You take a pair of pliers, you pull the retaining clip back, you put a screwdriver down in there, and you pry it out. Sometimes it takes several tries. And then once you get that out, it comes out. So there's the first side. So we'll rotate it around, and we'll do the next side. Probably should have a smaller screwdriver, but this is the only one I have on the workbench at the moment. That one's out. Okay, like I said, I'm going to show you old school on how to get this apart. So if you have a vise, you got to have a vise. We're going to loosen this up. So now we're going to set the U-joint here to where these two are sitting on the edges of the vise. Then I'm going to take a dead blow hammer and see the cap here, how it's recessed. I'm going to take and smack it once. Now the cap is level. So you don't want to hit down here on the drive shaft. You want to hit right here on the metal end. So then we're just going to take and tap on it. Until this hits, and now the cap is that is as far as we can get the cap out, because the the center of the U-joint is hitting the outside piece. So we're going to go ahead and do this side next and get this one out as far as we can. I usually use a smaller hammer, but I wanted to make sure it works. So now that we got that done, usually put this in the vise now, and then there we go. So there's this one, and you can see this side here was also okay. It still had grease in it, and all the roller bearings are still intact. So now we're going to come over to this side, do the same thing, grab it. Oops. I had the vise tight. Okay, there's that grease cap off. So now that one also looked like it had plenty of grease in it. So now you're left with the drive shaft with the cross piece of the U-joint in there. So now you should be able to just push this back and out it comes. Alright, so let me get this back over here where I had it. Alrighty, let me, so that's how you get the U-joint out. Let me go ahead and get the new U-joint, and we'll get set up to reinstall the new U-joint. Alright, so here's the new parts. I always like getting Moog U-joints. So in the box, you have your new U-joint assembly, and you've got 4 clips and a grease fitting, because this actually has a place for the grease fitting so you can keep it greased. Alright, so now the next thing I always like to do is I went ahead and I reassembled the old U-joint as best as possible, because what I like to do is I like to match the caps up to make sure that the caps are the same size. And then I also want to make sure that on some U-joints, these 2 caps are different sizes than these 2 caps. This one here, they seem to be all the same size, so it doesn't matter. And then I also like to lay the old U-joint on top to make sure that this measurement is the same. So everything looks good that way. All the caps are the same size, so the caps are the right size. The dimension this way is the same size, so we're all good. So now the next thing I like to do is we'll take this U-joint here and we'll carefully take all the grease caps off and set them on the workbench. You don't want to take and knock those roller bearings out. That is very important. So let me get a rag and let me clean this up a little bit, and we'll get this new U-joint center section put in here, and we'll start putting the grease caps on, and I'll continue showing you how to do this old school with a vise. All right, I sprayed this down with Brake Clean. I cleaned it up. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of transmission fluid in the drive shaft just to help it slide a little bit easier. So now the next step is this. We are going to take the center section, and I'm going to put the grease fitting so it faces out. So now I'm going to put this in here like so. Take one of the new caps. Now those roller bearings cannot fall out, so there's plenty of grease in there so they won't fall out. So then you want to install the cap on the U-joint, and that's going to keep those roller bearings from falling out. So now once I have that in there, what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to go ahead and pull this back and put it in the vise, and I'm going to press that cap in. So that cap is not all the way in, but almost all the way in. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a socket as a spacer. so we can push this cap in so we can get the retaining clip in. So I'm not quite in there yet. Okay. Now I have this one in here far enough that I can get the new retaining clip in. So I'm going to go ahead and put the new retaining clip in. Be sure you're wearing eye protection when you're doing this. And there, it is in. So now we flip it back over. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to tighten it back up so it holds it. And if you notice, I have the vise at an angle to the workbench, so the drive shaft will sit on the workbench while I'm working on it. So now this is the tricky part. You don't want to lose those roller bearings. One lay down, and then you have to take everything back apart. So what you do is, you can see how this one's moving nice and freely. You want to slide it over and kind of center it. I got my glove stuck in there. There we go. So see how the center section is sliding? So it's engaged in these needle bearings, and it's engaged in those needle bearings. So once you have it there, then you're going to do the same thing. You're going to pull it back. Use the center of the vise so you don't break your vise. I've actually broken a vise putting U-joints in. And you still want to make sure that this is sliding properly. See how it's sliding nice and good? Go ahead and put that in. I'm going to flip it over, since the position I'm in, to get the socket back in here to push the joint in the rest of the way. Come on, stay please. There we go. And then you just push this one in. Until you get it in there far enough. To get the new clip in. So there's that. Now if you notice, this one here looks like it kind of pushed out a little bit. So what I like to do after I get it done is I like to put the socket there and take the hammer and just tap that side, and there, your U-joint is installed. It's installed. It's not catching on anything because this joint is moving nice and good. The clip is in this side. The clip is in this side. Now it looks like this joint, this end cap is sticking through a little farther than this one, but I can tell that that's okay because this piece is thicker than this piece. But what counts is that the retainer is in and the cap is against the retainer, and the retainer is in and the cap is on the retainer. So now all you have to do is put these two caps back on here. Be careful, they will fall off. So those are ready to be installed. Back in the car, we'll put the grease fitting in, and we can't grease this yet until it's back in the car where these caps cannot shoot off. So we'll put this in, and I'll find the right size socket to tighten this. Okay, I'll find the right socket to tighten up the grease fitting. So now it's all back together. We'll go ahead and install it back in the car, and then we'll grease it until just a little bit of grease comes out. Then we know it's full. So there you go. That is how you install a U-joint, old school, with using a vise, a hammer, and a socket, the way I was originally taught. Sometimes the U-joints are really stuck in here. I have broken a vise. So instead of using the vise, what I'll use is I'll actually use a ball joint. The ball joint U-clamp with a forcing screw to get them in and out. But I haven't had to do that on most light-duty stuff. Usually heavy-duty stuff, you have to use the ball joint tool. All right, everybody. So that's how you put a U-joint in an old-school way. If you like my videos, please subscribe. You can do that right in this corner here. And please give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you all later. Thank you.